Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm just giving you an update on what I've been reading. So I have been reading so many books, and I've been DNFing a lot of books too. I think some of these books I actually read at the end of May, and I apologize because I didn't put up a May wrap up. I had a book haul that I put up, and I was so focused on that I simply forgot. So I'm going to share that here today. But I do have a couple of DNFs. I also just posted my June on the Range roundup. So that's something that I've been reading lately. In case you're interested, I'll leave a link to that in the cards. And then I had, well, in that pile of June on the Range, I had a couple of books I DNF'd there because I'm at the point of I have too many books to read, and so I don't have patience for nonsense. If it's a book that I'm not interested in, that I'm not enjoying, then I'm going to move to another one. And so I may go back to those. Sometimes it's just the mood that you're in, and it's just not the right time to read that book. Those books go back on my shelf for a later time. Other books are, no, it's just not for me. There's nothing against the books though. So just know if you love this book, if it's your favorite book, I am not saying anything judgmental about your reading. Your tastes are different than mine. And your thresholds are different than mine. We all have different boundaries, different experiences. And so our reading experiences are different as well. But we all have different reasons for reading different things. So the first one that I DNF'd was Oh Pioneers. I know this is a classic. I know that everybody seems to enjoy this book, but it was not for me. This was just boring. I'm sorry, but for me, I tried reading this several times. I picked this up, and every time I fell asleep. I mean, it was like watching paint dry on the wall. No, it wasn't for me. The writing, I thought that it was going to be for me because I had heard that it was more of a simplistic, slower pace. Well, it is slow, but it's too slow for me. So this was a DNF, and I don't think I will get back to that one, unfortunately. The other DNF, and I'm really sad about this one, because this book was recommended to me by my librarian. She had sent me a little post-it, so I had it on my list. And then I also had a booktube friend that wanted to read this. Sandy misreads a lot, and so we were going to buddy read this. We were both so excited about it, and that is Lessons in Chemistry. And this is so popular. When I went on Goodreads, I was shocked at how high it was. It was like a 4.5 or almost a 5-star read for most people. A lot of people have read it. So it's probably fantastic. It just wasn't for me. It starts out, well, first of all, you look at this cover and you think, oh, this is going to be a rom-com, you know, that kind of thing. So I thought it's going to be a lighthearted rom-com. No, it's not. It is set in the 1950s, early 1950s. I think it goes back and forth, but where I was in the story, it was like 1952. And it's about this woman who is facing a lot of struggles because she wants to be this, you know, scientist in a man's world. So that's the premise of the story. The problem I had was she was so cynical. Now, that could change. It could have completely changed. That might have been her character arc where she ends up seeing the light and changing her whole direction. I don't know because I didn't give it a chance, to be fair to the book. But what I had read so far, it was just too cynical. Everyone around her were horrible people. Nobody was cheering for her. Life was horrible. She was in a horrible situation. Something very horrible happens to her at the very beginning of the story. That was bad. It was hard to read that scene, but I still was interested in the story. The problem was the language, the obscenities. Oh my goodness. Here's the problem with me. That is one of my boundaries. I don't use ugly words. I raise my boys not to use ugly words. My husband doesn't use ugly words. You don't come in my house using ugly words. And so I guard against bad language. Now, I'm not judging anybody else for bad language. Everybody has their thing that they do. But for me, I value words. And I think that the way we communicate with each other in a polite society should have value. So I am really not one for ugly words. I mean, I can stump my toe and I don't say anything ugly. So it bothers me badly. And whenever someone is in a conversation with me and they start using ugly words, I feel disrespected by that and I quit listening. And so this one was way over my threshold with obscenities. Other people could read this and not even notice it. But for a person who doesn't use any, I mean, on Netflix for me, I have my profile for children. So, because I don't want to hear that stuff. I just don't like it. And so for me, that was the problem. So I just had to quit. Unfortunately, I had to quit reading. It might be a fantastic story, and it could be that she is cynical in the beginning and then she has this wonderful, you know, aha moment. I don't know. I wish her well, but it just wasn't for me. So this was a highly popular book. I know it's highly rated. I'm not saying not read it. It just wasn't the book for me. So then I read another Agatha Christie. I wanted to continue my Miss Marple series. I'm reading through Miss Marple this year for Serious About Series. And so I wanted to read the next one in publication order of the Miss Marple that I haven't read yet, because I've read them out of order, but I'm trying to go back and kind of go back through them. Well, I thought the next one was The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, but it was They Do It with Mirrors. So I got that all wrong. But anyway, I didn't have either one of those books anyway. So I checked out an audio version of The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. Is that the name of it? Let me make sure. Yeah, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. I loved it. I gave that one a 5-star. That is my kind of Miss Marple book. Miss Marple is all the way through it, which I loved. The characters were great. The mystery itself was great. And I am happy to say I solved this one. I was so happy with myself because I saw halfway through who did this, and I thought, okay, that's who did this one. And I do that every time. I'm so convinced that this person did it, and by the end, nope, they didn't. This is the first time I have figured out who did this, who committed this crime. Now, I will say I wasn't exactly sure why, and I know that don't make any sense, but I was like, okay, why would they do this? But I knew that that person did it. Just something that was said, a clue, made me know that person did it, but I still didn't know why. So that kept me reading because I wanted to know, okay, am I right? Did this person do it? And why did they do it? And the twist was the best twist yet. I loved the twist in this one. And as soon as I read the twist, it was, yep, this is a 5-star. I will be revisiting this one. I can't wait to see the Miss Marple TV adaptation of this, the episode of this one. I loved it. It was so good. I hope there's an episode. I think there's an episode for every one of Miss Marple's books. So anyway, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side was great. It's based on, the premise is there is this celebrity. She's moved into this town and she has this party and someone dies and they think it's murder, and then they think that it was actually murdering the wrong person, and the story goes from there. I loved it. It was great, a 5-star read, and the twist was fantastic. And even better, Miss Marple is all the way through that one. So if you do love Miss Marple, I highly suggest picking up The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. So now I need to go back and read They Do It with Mirrors. I'm like, why did they use mirrors in 2 of her Miss Marple books? That was totally confusing. So I did read that one. Now I also picked up a random read from my shelf, and that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This was totally a random read because I've never read Coraline. I've had this for quite some time. And my son, my youngest, loved the little movie, the Tim Burton movie, Coraline, when he was younger. He watched that over and over. He loved the music behind that one and the way that that's drawn, which I do too. I find it interesting. This is gothic for children for sure. The show, the little movie, the Tim Burton movie, is creepy, but it's not frightening or scary. I'll say that this, though, really was creepy. It was super creepy and a little scary. The way that the story is told in the book is much scarier than the movie. Now, I'm not saying a middle grader couldn't read this and they would be totally afraid. I'm not saying that. But I found it to be a little creepy. I thought it was very creepy. But I did enjoy it. I thought that it had all the gothic elements I like. You know, it's not for everyone because some people don't like creepy stories. I like creepy stories. I like the stories that are kind of fairy tale-ish feeling, the dark fairy tale feel. I like that. And so not too much. I don't want graphic scenes or anything, but a middle grade version I can handle. So I enjoyed it. I like the way Neil Gaiman told this story. So that was a good read for me as well. Oh, and I also want to mention that I read Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. I'll leave a link in the cards because I did a whole video just on that book. I loved it. It was a 5-star read. If you're interested in reading that, you might want to check out that video. So I'm not going to talk about it here, but that was the next book that I finished. Then I read Kaleidoscope by Brian Selznick. I don't have a copy because I've already returned it to the library. And I was so excited to read this because I had just read The Marvels and I thought, well, I'll continue reading through his books. And so my son, he's read Brian Selznick. He loves him, but he had not read Kaleidoscope either. So he has a copy of Kaleidoscope somewhere. I should have found his copy. And then I checked it out from the library and we read it together. And both of us were disappointed in this book. I thought that it didn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry, but it was very short, so it didn't take long. And it's like little short stories, which was fine, but it made it as if the short stories were going to be somehow connected because it kept mentioning this person, James. So you think, oh, it's going to connect. And so that's why I kept reading it, because I thought at the end of the story, we're going to connect and finally see who James is and what this is really about. That did not happen. It made no sense at the end. And I'm sorry, Brian Selznick, but that was a total waste of my time. I did enjoy the pictures. He does a great job with pictures. This just needed a lot of editing. There were a couple of stories, short stories, that were really good. This, though, is marketed as a novel. If it would have said, okay, it's a short story collection, random short stories, I think I would have been a little more patient with it, but I didn't know what it was. And so as I went in, I was hoping for some kind of connection, and there is not a connection in the stories. And a lot of the stories just kind of end abruptly. And there's no resolution anywhere else. So yeah, that was a fail for me. It was a 2-star read, unfortunately. So now on a happier note, I read The Greatest Little Comic Book. So one of the prompts on the Summer Book Bingo is to read a graphic novel. I don't read a lot of graphic novels. My son has pulled several of his graphic novels for me to read. He said that they were beginning graphic novels for beginners or easy readers sort of thing, which is right up my alley because that's where I need to start. He reads graphic novels all the time and he loves them, and he's a huge collector of graphic novels. I'm not. So the other morning I came in and fixed my coffee and went to sit down where I usually read my Bible, and there sitting on the side table was this wonderful little treasure. It's a Classics Illustrated comic book version of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. My son found this and surprised me with it. He knew I needed a graphic novel and he said a comic book would work for that, so here you go. I read this that morning and had such fun. I loved it. I loved it. I think these came out in like the 1960s or 1970s or something, and now I want to collect all of them. When I got to the end, I noticed that on the back there was like 100-something of these Classics Illustrated, and most of them are classics I've read or I'm interested in reading. So I thought it would be a wonderful way if I find maybe the Jane Eyre or some of these others. That would be fantastic to read the novel and then celebrate it with one of these comic books. So I was able to fulfill the prompt of reading a graphic novel. because I read this, and then I also enjoyed it so much, and now I'm on the hunt for more of these. I just loved it so much. This was fantastic. If you've never read A Tale of Two Cities, I highly recommend it. I have actually posted a video of a review. I'll try to leave a link to that in the cards or in the description box below. Loved that book. It's a great one, and it is one that I think is an important book to read. But then to be able to celebrate it through these pictures, it was just wonderful. So thank you to my son for giving me that, surprising me the other morning. It was a fantastic treat. So then I picked up another Newbery. If you follow my channel, you know that I'm trying to read through the Newbery Award winners. I've been reading a lot of the earlier Newberys. This one was 1928. Gay Neck, The Story of a Pigeon, was the winner of the Newbery in 1928. This is the story of a pigeon and his birth, how he's trained, and how he serves in the war. And it was boring. I did not like this book. It started out promising. The beginning, when he's born and he's trained and he connects with his owner, was wonderful. I loved learning about the pigeons, the difference in the pigeons, how they train them. All of that was wonderful. But once we were into the story, several chapters in, it first of all was confusing because this author would go back and forth, and sometimes you were in the mind of Gay Neck the pigeon, and other times you were in the mind of his owner. And I never knew where I was. It was not a very good warning on when we were switching, and I became confused several times in the story. It also had a lot of Hinduism in it. Nothing wrong with that. I love learning about other religions, but it didn't explain, you know, the religion, and it would just have these sort of rituals and things that I didn't understand. Unfortunately, I didn't understand what those were, the reasoning behind them. So that confused me even more. So I think my biggest issue was I was confused from the perspective, and then the religious parts I'm not familiar with, and it really didn't explain it in a good way, which surprises me because it being a middle grade, you would think it would kind of give a little bit of, you know, some more details to help you with that part. And then the part where Gay Neck and the other pigeons are helping to carry the messages through the war was just too much textbook style, like you're reading, you know, an encyclopedia. I don't know of any middle grade student that would enjoy this book, unfortunately. So this was a 2-star only because I enjoyed the beginning. But I did read it, and that one I will check off my Newbery list. And then finally, I read Mystery of the Hidden Hand by Phyllis Whitney. This was fantastic. If you enjoy middle grade mysteries like Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, this is for you. This was the kind of book I would have read as a kid. It was published in the 1960s, and I think it's still great today. This one I read for the Summer Book Bingo for an island setting because it does take place on a Greek island, I think in Greece. Anyway, it's an island. And it's about this brother and sister duo who are staying at a resort there. The mystery starts on the very first page. They're at the resort and someone comes through in this dark cloak, and you're trying to figure out who that is, why they're there, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, there's some things that go missing, and they're looking for something, and you know, there's several little mysteries in the story to keep your attention. I highly recommend this too for the duo. I find it refreshing that in this book and the last one I read by Phyllis Whitney, the siblings actually love each other and get along and encourage one another. The parents encourage them, they encourage one another, and I find that refreshing because a lot of the books I read now that are middle grade, they're not that way. They're annoyed by each other. They don't like each other. It's like, okay, I want to read a happy family story. And so I found that to be refreshing in this. They really work as a team to solve the mystery in the story. And I really enjoyed that. So this was a great one, and I do want to read more by Phyllis Whitney. So those are the books that I have been reading. I apologize for not sharing these earlier. I just had so many other things I wanted to post. What have you been reading? Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.